Thank you for joining me today as we continue our study of Matthew's Gospel. We will be examining Matthew chapter 2, verses 19 through 23, and today's lesson is titled The Nazarene. Let's dive right into our lesson today as we prepare to wrap up the second chapter of Matthew's Gospel. If you have a New Testament, follow along with me as I read our passage for today. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the District of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. An outline of today's passage would look like this: Herod the Great's death, Joseph's dream, the return to Israel, divine warning, family settles in Nazareth, summation of prophecy. According to history, Herod the Great died in the year 4 BC in the town of Jericho. Josephus, the Jewish historian, tells us that Herod died after a lunar eclipse and explains that Herod's final illness was excruciating. Some have suggested that Herod suffered from kidney disease, paranoia, depression, and even scabies. Herod continued his crazy behavior to his grave and worried that no one would mourn his death, thus ordering a large group of distinguished men come to Jericho, and upon his death the men would be put to death also. Fortunately for these men, Herod's wishes were not carried out. After Herod's death, his kingdom was divided among 3 of his sons. Archelaus became ethnarch of the Tetrarchy of Judea. Herod Antipas became tetrarch of Galilee and Perea, and Philip became tetrarch of territories east of the Jordan. Maybe this is why Jesus is recorded as saying, "A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand." Next, Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, is once again divinely instructed on caring for the young Messiah. Through a dream, an angel advises Joseph that it is safe for the family to return to Israel. Joseph is obedient to the divine instruction and returns with Mary and Jesus to Israel. From the text, it appears that Joseph intended to take the family back to Bethlehem, Judea, but soon discovered that Archelaus was ruling in place of his father, Herod the Great. Archelaus was the ethnarch of Judea, Samaria, and Idumea, which is biblical Edom, from 4 BC to 6 AD. Archelaus was the son from Herod's union with a Samaritan woman named Malthace. Like his father, Archelaus was very cruel and even killed 3,000 Pharisees. Augustus Caesar gave Archelaus the larger part of his father's kingdom, but did not give him the title of king. Archelaus divorced one wife in order to marry another woman whose husband was still alive. This act, along with his cruelty, caused the Jews to complain to Caesar, and ultimately Caesar deposed Archelaus and banished him to Vienne in Gaul. God, who is faithful, once again warns Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, not to return to Bethlehem, Judea, where Herod's son Archelaus was now reigning. Instead of returning with his family to Bethlehem, Judea, Joseph takes his family to the District of Galilee, to a town called Nazareth. The Galilee is a large region in northern Israel. In Roman times, Israel was divided into 3 sections: Judea, Samaria, and Galilee. The Galilee was the largest of the 3 sections. Galilee is where most of Jesus' public ministry took place. The Galilee consists of a rocky terrain and 2 mountains, and receives a good deal of rain, which accounts for the lush landscape in the land. In modern times, the Galilee is a popular tourist destination because of its landscape and the fact that Jesus grew up and ministered there. I can personally attest to the fact that the Galilee is relatively peaceful compared to other parts of Israel. In Jesus' time, Nazareth was an isolated village with approximately 200 people. Outside of the New Testament, Nazareth is never mentioned until the Byzantine time, or the 4th century. It has been discovered through archaeological evidence that Nazareth was a small agricultural village during Jesus' time. Jesus spent his childhood in Nazareth before beginning his public ministry. This is where Jesus was groomed for his earthly ministry. Nazareth in the District of Galilee, with its quiet, serene farmland, would have been the perfect place for Jesus to spend hours of prayer before being thrust into public ministry. I love the fact that God could have put Jesus right in the center of religious happenings in the city of Jerusalem, but God, in his perfect sovereignty, hid Jesus in the most unlikely of places. Herod Antipas, another son of Herod the Great, was the tetrarch of Galilee, and he reigned for 42 years. It seems that divorce was quite common in this family, and like his brother Archelaus, Herod Antipas divorced his wife in order to marry his brother Philip's wife. This event caused John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus, to publicly condemn this union, and John was ultimately put to death for taking a stand against unrighteousness. Summation of prophecy is the fourth rabbinical category, called sod, meaning secret or mystery. When Matthew says, "So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene," he is not quoting a specific passage from the Old Testament, but only giving a summary of what the Old Testament taught. How do we know this is what Matthew was doing? Well, according to Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum, the clue is in the word prophet. The word prophet is plural, and Matthew is not quoting a particular prophet, but only summarizing what the prophets taught. Now, did the Old Testament prophet say he should be called a Nazarene? Not exactly. But in the 1st century, the Nazarenes were a despised people. It was a derogatory term. How do we know that being a Nazarene was considered an insult? Well, we have the witness of Nathanael, a disciple of Jesus. Before becoming a follower of Jesus, Nathanael's response was, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Think about it for a second. Have you ever prejudged someone based on where they come from? I know I have. We have all done this. There are many places within my own country that we consider unworthy, poor areas that have people with little education. We judge these areas and people and say to ourselves, "Can anything good come from there?" People who were Nazarenes were despised and rejected, and the Old Testament prophets taught that Messiah would be despised and rejected. Let's take a look at Old Testament passages that taught that Messiah would be despised and rejected. First, Isaiah said the following about the future Messiah. "He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem." Next, the psalmist says the following about the Messiah. "But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people." The prophet Zacharias says the following about the Messiah. "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Zechariah also says these powerful words concerning the Messiah: "And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son." So when Matthew tells us that the Old Testament prophets said that Messiah would be called a Nazarene, he is summing up what the Old Testament prophets taught concerning the Messiah, and is actually saying he shall be called despised and rejected. In conclusion, in today's Matthew passage, the family of Jesus is returning to Israel after fleeing to Egypt. With plans to settle back in Bethlehem, Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, is warned by God in a dream to settle in another part of Israel. Joseph chooses to take his family to a tiny town in the District of Galilee called Nazareth. Jesus grew up in this obscure farming village, away from Jerusalem, awaiting his public ministry and ultimately his true mission. Matthew's purpose is to show his Jewish readers that Jesus is indeed the long-awaited Messiah of Israel, and that is my intent in this New Testament study as well. Thank you for joining me today as we continue our study of Matthew's Gospel. Remember, we are doing an expository study of the New Testament, and this takes time. I hope you enjoy our look into first century history, which helps us to see the Gospel text through first century eyes. Stay tuned for our next lesson from Matthew chapter 3 titled The Baptist.